getting all green under the gills. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys Dragons Series 8 Gold Label Collection Eternal Clan Dragon. Long forgotten, such creatures were now thought to be myth and mystery, titans of the ancient realms who dwelled long before man, ruling every corner of the earth. But they disappeared, and with them their stories and powers slipped into legends, or so we were left to believe. While I'm getting ready to be dealing with more dragons, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample and the other samples of the dragon figures we've looked at here lately here on this channel. Earlier, having already looked at the Eternal Clan Dragon, the more beige kind of sand color version, and we also looked at Cerberus. Well, I think I might have even called him Cerberus in the review. I kind of like that idea of calling him Cerberus a little bit more, the Berserker Clan Dragon. Now we're going to be having a look at a repaint of the Eternal Clan Dragon, now decked out all here in a glorious forest green. Taking the tape measure though, let's measure right to the very top of the wings once again. Now I'm going to beeline it past the wing that's in front of us, simply because the wing behind it is the one that's the tallest. And factoring that in, then the Eternal Clan Dragon, now in green, stands about 12 inches in height, or it's going to be about 30 centimeters tall. Speaking of the other dragons, though, let's slide over the Gold Label Edition version of Eternal Clan Dragon and bring in the other Eternal Clan Dragon so you guys can see, while the molding is going to be exactly the same to one another, the colors are definitely one thing that does change between the two. And then if I can hopefully free up a lot of space, because again, these guys do take up a lot of that space, let's just reach off to the side here, bring back in also Cerberus. Now, one thing I did certainly mention when we did have the review of both of these guys, was the fact that these dragons do take up a lot of space, but if you have the space available, they make some glorious looking statues in your collection. I'll bring back that other Eternal Dragon here in a moment. First, though, let's actually have a closer look at now the Gold Label Edition, which, as already mentioned, is exactly the same mold. What they have done, of course, very drastically different, is colored this guy all in green. Something more you're used to seeing, at least when I think of dragons. I tend to think of green dragons. What's the color you always think of when you think of dragons? Let me know down below in the comment section. Assembly also was required for this, and assembly, being that it's the same mold, was exactly the same. One thing I did also notice, though, when assembling this dragon, just to pick this up to show you what assembly is required, you have to take the main body of the dragon, and you have to very firmly attach the front paw. Would you still call this a paw or a claw? A claw. Puppies have paws. Dragons have claws. Never want to get those two mixed up. But you're going to take then the claws here. One claw is going to plug into place, and then the back two hind claws will also plug into the back. They snap in very securely, so the likelihood of me being able then to remove this to show you how the assembly was required probably would likely snap the pegs on the inside, and that's going to make me very sad, so I'm not going to do that. But take my advice, though, when you are snapping in this place, just take a little bit of pressure on your thumbs, push that all the way down, and you'll hear a very satisfying snap. Not the kind of snap. No, not the kind of snap that's going to be breaking plastic, but the kind of snap that's going to ensure the dragon isn't going to be going anywhere. From there, the other thing that was required, of course, to take the wings and snap those into place, too. This wing, which I did mention when we had a look at the Eternal Dragon before, initially I had faced the other way, realizing, of course, looking at the images of this, that the wing is supposed to snap forward. So when you have the extended fingers like this, they're supposed to be pointing in the direction that the dragon is facing. Well, I guess that's not 100% true. The dragon's technically facing that way, but the direction in which the head is. This plugs in, although it didn't plug in as well as maybe the first time we had a look at Eternal Dragon, but I have to say the one that I had the harder time with, this wing actually snapped a lot easier on this dragon, unlike the other earlier Eternal Clan Dragon. So the assembly really is only just taking the body, attaching it to the base, then taking the two wings, snapping those into place. And again, like, you've got yourself a really interesting looking dragon. One, again, more familiar in colors, at least for me. Getting a closer look at the head sculpt, while the sculpting may still be the same, I gotta say, like, the colors and the features of the face pop a lot more here. Not only are we treated to more kind of a forest green use of a green that they've applied to the skin here, but also as well, really like the use of this sort of beige color that makes up sort of the lower part of the jaw and just a part above the part where the row of the teeth start to form. The teeth, like the one we looked at before, kind of a more of an off yellowish color. Speaking, though, of yellow, one thing I do really like that they've done better on this dragon than the one we looked at earlier was the way they've painted the eyes. Hopefully you can see the peepers. Though tiny and small, they're very cool looking eyes. I love the little tiny slits. It's almost as if it's looking straight up at you. The colors on this eye are a lot more vibrant than the one we looked at before. So again, I think the colors work a lot better to just be a little more popping and vibrant on this particular dragon. Of course, when you look at in between the brow here, you've got this darker use of black paint that's been added in there before. The other Eternal Dragon would have essentially taken, well, maybe it would be helpful to probably stop talking about this and simply just bring it in. The other Eternal Dragon would have still used sort of this rusted beige color throughout the majority of its body. That's including, of course, the head as well. Be careful not to bang and clip the wings, but you can see like the difference between the two. I do like the way they've added much darker colors here, not only for the areas around the eyes, like the original Eternal, but also the way they've added the darker black in between the brow of the eyes. It really helps to bring some much needed color, because the other Eternal Dragon, as good as it may have been, did have a lot of very much of the same similar colors, and the colors didn't, I feel, pop as much as what we're getting here in this. Put the dragon back over there for a second. I'll bring him back in a second. You can see as well, he's got still the scales that stick out the side of his face, these long ridge of scales that stick out the top of its head, and big giant horns that stick out the back. There is no articulation on these, as they're just simply statued pieces. You've got some nice spikes that run down the top of the head, running all the way down the body, sort of running in between the two cities of the wings on either side, but then the spikes continue on their merry little way and go all the way down to the bottom of the tail. The way they've colored this, not only, and striped it in black, kind of reminds me of, isn't it an iguana? Iguana would be the best way to describe it. Let's say, if you really weren't to look at the head, and you certainly weren't to just to ignore the fact that there's wings on this, it almost looked like you look at like a pet iguana in one of like those pet tanks that you see in a pet shop. Very much, I kind of get that same sort of color scheme when I'm looking at it here. The colors of the green are also shared with light and darker versions of it. So you got the more lighter colors of the green down below here, more the darker green, where you get more of the bumps and the ridges and the scales that make up the dragon's body, of course. And then, like the one we looked at before, it also has an undercoloring where it's underbody. As you can see, it does have the more lighter color beige. It's a really nice looking dragon, though. And though, as much as I really did like the other one, I think I really like the coloring use on this one a lot more. Now, as far as I know, we only are getting 2 versions of the Eternal Dragon, but I would say up it to 3. Release 3 versions of this, and maybe give the 3rd version either as like an ice dragon or as a fire dragon. Bring in, although we do have a lot of reds really in the other Eternal Dragon, no. Make it more of an ice dragon, because I definitely think they could do a lot of cool stuff with this specific mold. Get more mileage out of it, I feel. And they could definitely release this, I feel, as an ice dragon. Who would certainly be on board to see that. The wings themselves are a lot darker also than the one we got before. Like the head we already talked about, the fact that the wings also bring in all this nice darker color paint. Because with the wings like before, just again bring back in the other one we looked at earlier, the wings were fine, but it didn't really have a lot of chance to pop a lot of those details and things that they sculpted into the wings. By bringing in all this additional darker color, not only does it make actually the skin's texturing stand out a lot more, but it also makes as well like the individual sections of the wings, I think, look a lot more, well, separated. Because again, you've got all those little appendages of the actual the dragon fingerlings that actually attach onto the wings. Like overall, it's a kind of really nice looking dragon. One last time again, just to bring this one in and to bring back in the one we looked at before. A more personal preference than anything else. I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved the look of the original Eternal Clan Dragon, but I almost think I would have flipped the color scheme around. Maybe release this guy as the standard release Eternal Clans, and then release this one as the gold label edition. Because I think if I had the chance, I only had the available space to pick up one of them, I think I would be leaning more, I think, to the idea of actually picking up the green version. Not only because it's more the classic dragon colors that I'm used to kind of. When I was a kid and growing up, I always thought of dragons being green. I think for that reason, I would more, I think, gravitate towards getting the green version. But I love the idea of actually having both released from the folks over at McFarlane Toys. I say, though, do one better. Not only giving us 2 versions that we looked at in this review, but also releasing a 3rd version. Get a trifecta, a trilogy of Eternal Clan Dragons. We got sort of a rusted red. We've got the green. I think one thing that would certainly be nice to put in the middle of the display on the shelf is an ice blue dragon. Using, yes, the same mold, but bring in some frostier colors of blue, I think would work really, really well with this particular mold. While I may have talked in depth about how the two dragons are sharing the same mold to one another, the one thing I didn't touch base on is the display base that also comes with both these dragons being exactly the same to one another. Not only the same molding, but also the same color scheme too. I guess really when you wanted to display these dragons on the shelf, I would like to want to put them together. And I think there's a consistency of having the bases being colored the same. Sure, there could have been an opportunity for McFarlane's team to go in and color them differently, but I think if you're going to be giving them a rocky terrain on one, then to use the mold with the same dragon anyways, why not have the colors exactly the same? So again, you've got that level of consistency when you've got the two dragons on display. When it comes to displaying these guys, I think my eyes will be wandering more to this one just because I love the vibrancy of the green that they ended up using. It's not just one shade of green either. While the original sandier red of the Eternal Clan Dragon kind of was head to toe, we got a lot of mild variations here of the green that they ended up using here. We got a little bit of the yellows also added just to the top of the spine of the back of the dragon. Then you got the darker greens happening, and then it transitions oh so nicely into a lighter green as we get to the more beige undercarriage. The thing I also really like is the use of the black wash here. Not only it helps to bring the details out to the wings, but by also adding a lot of much appreciated black to the spine, the spikes, and the section of the color in between the brow of the dragon's eyebrows, I think is really where a lot of the details on this dragon, while may not have been lost before in the other Eternal Clan, I think showcase a lot nicer with this release. Of the two dragons that we have had a look at of the Eternal Clan variety, which do you prefer more? The sandier red approach that we did have a look at with the original Eternal Clan Dragon, or the more vibrant green that we're getting with this release? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also as well, if you don't mind me throwing out a question to you, when you guys think of dragons, what color do you tend to think of? I did mention in this review, I tend to think of green, only because when I was growing up, I think every time a dragon was depicted in a book, it was always tend to be green. Of course, later on, as I read through fantasy books and different art prints, dragons were also interpreted in other different color schemes too, across the entire spectrum of the rainbow. But I always tend to think of green when I think of dragons. When you think of dragons, what color do you think of right away? Let me know down below. And also as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the gold label edition Eternal Clan Dragon in green. We can have a look at this review. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this review, why not hit it with a like? If you're loving the content you guys are seeing and do certainly want to stay on board for more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And also, if you haven't already done so, make sure you ring the bell notification. It ensures that you're going to get those reminders every single time a new video posts. If you're that person that says, I didn't know this guy was posting content anymore, you're the person, sadly, that's not been ringing the bell notification. And there's definitely going to be a lot more McFarlane Toys reviews coming your way, so make sure you're coming back here on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.